Ah, finally outside again. And we even made it to the city. Looks like we'll be out of here in no time. Let's get to the bus station as quickly as possible, using the burst beam. Wait, what? Oh, Jesus! The Rooftop City is like a big playground. It's a giant, wide-open space. There's lots to see, do, collect, and discover. The ultimate goal is to get to the right on this screen, and if you want to be fairly boring about it, or if you're bad at traversing the upper levels, you can go along the mostly solid ground level. The main obstacles here are rolling robots, so it's no real challenge. Unfortunately, that also means that there's nothing to pick up either. What nice people. We should come back here for a holiday when this is all over. Assuming we don't get grounded for skipping several days of school and stealing a bunch of stuff and murdering lots of people. On that rooftop is the path to the next screen, so let's not go there and instead take the middle path. That tiny platform with burst beam refills you saw in the upper left is very important, but not just yet. The middle is kind of like two levels in one. It contains a lot of opportunities to go either higher or lower. The platforming gets a bit trickier, obviously, but there's still nothing to really gain out of voluntarily choosing this path. That box will also be important later. I got a little confused here about the route I was taking. In a second I'll keep going right to show that the path that I was on would meet up with the ground path. Then it's up to the higher part of the middle path. And that switch will also be important later. There's a lot of fun stuff on the upper path, we'll get there in a minute. Rooftop City is the first place where multiple switches control the same pieces of level geometry. It doesn't happen too often, mostly because it can get confusing later on about what order in which you're supposed to do things, but we'll get to that much later. For now, it results in a fun little semi-puzzle. Alright, let's now look at the best way to go through Rooftop City. For starters, if you launch yourself up to this platform and then launch off of it to the left, and you don't miss the spring, and you don't miss with the burst beam in the first place, you get a chance at collecting the second hardest souvenir in the game, in my opinion anyway. This whole screen might seem incredibly daunting, and you're far more likely to die here than with the third souvenir, but once you know exactly what you need to do, it's not as hard to consistently pick the souvenir up, whereas the hardest of the three is, well, you'll see. And in case you were wondering, this is not actually my first attempt in this recording. I failed at this for nearly 30 minutes. This was mostly because I forgot what I needed to do to get up to the top half of the screen. Once I remembered, as you can see, it was smooth sailing. This last jump is the trickiest part, and it usually helps to have a vest as backup. Once you're in, it's not too much trouble to get out and carry on with the level. It's important to not be impatient if you miss the timing of the two platforms. Messing up because of that is the kind of thing that sends controllers through screens. Now let's do some more fun stuff. The upper path has the hardest platforming in Rooftop City, and in return you get some pretty nice rewards. Okay, here's where the box and the switch become important. The switch and this pressure plate both control the same two sets of platforms, toggling either the first or the second to appear. By putting the box on the pressure plate, we do have to do some beam management to keep the switch alive, but we benefit from it by having easy access to these platforms when we deactivate the switch. And now we can use even more burst beams. For some reason I have a tendency to screw this last jump up, so I just burst beam over to the secret constellation. Appropriately, it's a skydiver. And that's everything that this one screen has to offer. Let's continue on with the rest of the city. This screen is far more linear, a straight progression from left to right, and this lets the game throw a lot more enemies at you. Jumping robots, rolling robots, flying rocket launchers, bombers, more or less everything. If you want to maintain a steady pace through the screen, it can get quite treacherous, especially since, in spite of how physics should work, the bombers drop their bombs directly down. That rocket guard is a surprising nuisance, more so because I want to talk to that NPC right there. However, when you talk to people, all enemies slow to a halt, so I should be able to talk to him without getting... That was not supposed to happen. And now I'm just bored with this guard. And since there's 2 bombs right there, I have no problem with blowing him to hell. Health pickup, zoomed out view, no music. These usually mean one thing. Did you see something? Indeed, the crook took everything but the vest off our back. Thankfully, he'll still supply us with everything we need. At the start, he'll fly back and forth dropping bombs, occasionally orange ones that are on a slight delay. While we wait for our chance to hit him with one of those, we need to grab some burst beams from the rolling robots. Once he's stunned, we use the burst beam to jump up and then, ideally, bounce back and forth between the 2 springs that appear, dropping a beam into his head on each pass. You can usually get about 4 successful passes before he recovers, but with a certain trick it is possible to beat him within 2 cycles of his attacks. Once he's recovered, he'll shoot an array of bullets at you. These get harder and harder to dodge as he takes more damage typically. You can also drop the burst beam into his head, and while it doesn't now, I'm almost certain that when the game originally came out, it did more damage to him than the regular beam. Apparently a lot of players had trouble with this boss because they didn't properly catch on to the fact that if you hold down in the air you can drop the beam straight down instead of having to aim Kurt's underarm throw. I can understand how that, coupled with how many hits you need to land on the crook, would frustrate players. The bosses being difficult to beat because of their length was a common complaint, actually. I personally don't think they take that long at all, and even if they did, I don't have a problem with the boss requiring a significant amount of skill from the player to overcome as opposed to regular enemies. That is why they're bosses, after all. So let's talk about that trick. Once you get comfortable with the cycle of stunning him, collecting burst beams and jumping up, you can quickly defeat the crook by dropping a beam and a burst beam down at the same time, dealing double damage as I will now demonstrate. And if you're feeling really daring, you might be able to throw the beam and the burst beam at the crook before you're over him and then drop another pair while you're directly over him, dealing 4 hits in a single pass. I wouldn't know if it works for sure though, I'm not that crazy. If you jump as you're dropping the burst beam, you'll get extra height, which is the only way to reach some ledges. Well, this doesn't seem too good. This definitely doesn't seem too good. Rooftop City by night is pretty much a repeat of what the daytime variant was offering, a big playground to mess around in. Unfortunately, it's not as big, there aren't any decent secrets, and it's all over too soon, leaving a general feeling of disappointment, which goes nicely with what happens on the next screen when we get there. Again, the bottom path is fairly boring and doesn't pose any particular challenge, he said as he lost both of his extra hits to the most basic enemy. And then the edge of the screen is just up there. When I say it's short, I mean it's really short. The middle path is nothing to write home about either, and doesn't even contain anything fun like the multiple switches that the daytime city had. There are some rotating blocks that take you to the upper level though, but those don't get that fun until you're actually up there. The gateway to the upper level at the start here is pretty brutal, honestly. Getting up all 4 of these spike platforms isn't particularly easy. As opposed to something like an item upgrade or secret constellation or souvenir, all that's over to the left here is a refill on burst beams, which I don't actually need, so I'm not going for them a second time. If you're fast enough, you can use a burst beam to get up to the 4th spike platform, but it's still a tricky jump to make. Thankfully, I'm confident in my ability, confident in my ability to get up there and make it look easy. The platforming up top is a little harder, but still perfectly manageable, and nothing on the level of the daytime city. And here's where the rotating platforms get fun. But because I get confused about what I'm doing, we're not going to see that just yet. First we get to see the upper path reach its conclusion. Now let's go back to get the 2 secrets that are, in my opinion, a little lackluster. The first one is at the very top of the stage. What you're about to see here is a fairly impressive stream of incompetency. You have to be a special kind of stupid to manage to go from the quite comfortable situation that I was in to, well, what ends up happening. That happens a lot more often than you're seeing here. Let's give this another shot. Oh, come on, the one thing of those items that I actually want, and I keep missing it. Finally, that was fun. And if you didn't find that hidden batch of items, or couldn't get to them, you could have also gone and talked to this guy. But as you might have noticed, I'm not particularly interested in spending stars on anything, so even if he did have something that I didn't, I probably still wouldn't go for it. Well, if nothing else, Kurt's not going to get his head wet. This screen, I won't spoil it. What I will say is that, for some reason, I passed by a house that I shouldn't, and it takes me almost 30 seconds to realize that I've passed it. There's the house, and for some reason I completely ignored it. I don't know what was going through my head at the time, maybe heat exhaustion. Alright, so behind this house, with no indication that it exists, is an infinite refill of burst beams. That's the first thing that you need to somehow know exists. Can you see the platform we're jumping to? No, of course you can't. Even if this wasn't on YouTube, you wouldn't be able to tell where it is. Can you see where the next one is? This next part takes a couple of tries, hang on. and then you end up over here, where you can pick up an umbrella that Kurt will never use. Funny thing, you can get up to this platform right from the ground if you launch yourself high enough with the burst beam. I'd say that this is one of, if not the most obscurely hidden souvenir in the entire game. Almost all of the others have at least some sort of clue to their whereabouts, even the pillow you might find if you accidentally fell down the pit. Anyway, let's find somewhere to get out of the rain and figure out where to go next.